When did someone show up for you in a way you didn't expect? I was 22 when my world imploded on a Tuesday morning in October. My dad collapsed at his construction site. Massive heart attack. No warning. One minute he was framing a house, the next he was fighting for his life in intensive care. The doctor said he needed emergency bypass surgery, but our insurance had lapsed 3 months earlier when his company downsized. We need a $47,000 deposit before we can schedule the operation, the billing coordinator explained, her voice professional but not unkind. Without it, we can only provide stabilizing care. Stabilizing care. Medical speak for letting him die slowly. Mom had been gone since I was 8. Brain cancer took her when the bills from her treatment bankrupted us the first time. Dad never remarried, just worked himself into the ground trying to rebuild what we'd lost. Now history was repeating itself, and I felt like I was drowning in the same nightmare that had stolen my childhood. The same crushing weight of watching someone you love slip away while you stood helpless. I'd been saving every penny from my job at the auto parts store, living in a studio apartment that was basically a closet with a hot plate. Ramen noodles for dinner most nights, secondhand clothes, no cable, no social life. My entire savings account had $3,147. Dad's checking account had $312. We'd already sold Mom's jewelry years ago, the last pieces of her we had left. I spent the next 2 days calling every bank, charity, and relative we had left. Nothing. Dad's brothers had their own problems. One was unemployed, the other dealing with his wife's dialysis treatments. The banks laughed at my loan applications. A 22-year-old with no credit and no collateral asking for $50,000. GoFundMe raised $200 in 48 hours. Nowhere near enough. I posted on every social media platform, shared the link everywhere, begged friends to spread the word. Still nothing close to what we needed. By Thursday night, sitting in that sterile hospital hallway, I'd run out of options. Dad was stable but fading. Every hour that passed without surgery meant more damage to his heart. The nurses wouldn't look me in the eye anymore. I could see pity in their faces when they thought I wasn't watching. The same look they'd given me when Mom was dying. That careful, professional sympathy that meant they'd seen this story before and knew how it ended. That's when Tobias walked into my life. I was crying in the hospital cafeteria at 2 a.m., staring at my phone, calculating impossible math. Maybe I could sell my car, take out credit cards, beg strangers on the street. Nothing added up to enough. The vending machine hummed in the corner. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, and everything smelled like disinfectant and despair. That's when this guy in coveralls sat down across from me. He was maybe 60, weathered hands wrapped around a coffee cup, work boots caked with dried concrete, gray hair peeking out from under a baseball cap, tired eyes that had seen plenty of hard days. "You're Ray Carmichael's kid," he said. Not a question. I looked up, confused. "Do I know you?" "Name's Tobias. Worked with your dad on the Morrison project last summer. Heard about what happened." I nodded, too exhausted to be polite. Another well-wisher offering thoughts and prayers while my father died upstairs. I'd heard it all week. People telling me to stay strong, that everything happens for a reason, that God has a plan. Empty words that did nothing to pay hospital bills. "Listen," Tobias said, leaning forward. "I know you don't know me from Adam, but I got something to tell you." He pulled out a folded check and placed it on the table between us. The paper looked worn, like he'd been carrying it around for a while. I couldn't process what I was seeing. The amount was written in careful block letters, $47,000. "This isn't real," I whispered. "It's real," Tobias said quietly, "and it's yours." My hands were shaking as I picked up the check. "I don't understand. Why would you—" "Your dad saved my life 15 years ago," he interrupted. "I was drinking heavy back then. Lost my job, my wife, nearly lost my kids. One night I was standing on the Riverside Bridge ready to jump. Your father talked me down. Spent 3 hours in the rain just talking to me like I was worth something." Tobias stared into his coffee cup. He didn't know me. Could have driven right past. Instead, he pulled over, walked onto that bridge, and convinced a stranger that tomorrow might be better. I felt tears starting again. Dad never mentioned. Course he didn't. That's who Ray is. He don't make a big show of doing right. Tobias met my eyes. After that night, I got sober. Started my own contracting business. Been clean for 14 years now. My kids talk to me again. Got remarried to a woman who actually loves me. He pushed the check closer. I've been waiting 15 years to pay this debt. Figured I'd never get the chance. Then I heard about Ray being in here and I knew this was it. I stared at the check, afraid to touch it. "I can't take this. It's too much." "Boy, you listen to me." Tobias's voice got stern. "Your father gave me everything when he saved my life. This money, it's nothing compared to what he gave me. My kids knowing their daddy. My wife having a husband who comes home sober. The business I built with these hands." He held up his calloused palms. "Every house I've framed, every foundation I've poured, every paycheck I've earned, that's all because Ray Carmichael saw something worth saving in a broken-down drunk on a bridge." I was sobbing now, clutching the check. "But this is your money, your savings." "I got plenty more where that came from," Tobias said. "Business has been good to me, real good. And you know why? Because your dad taught me that one person can make all the difference in the world." He stood up, placing a gentle hand on my shoulder. "You go get that surgery scheduled. Ray's got more work to do in this world." I ran to the billing office, check in hand. The night coordinator looked skeptical until she verified the funds. Within an hour, Dad was being prepped for surgery. The operation took 8 hours. I paced the waiting room, replaying Tobias's words. My father had saved a stranger's life and never said a word about it. How many other lives had he touched without me knowing? During those 8 hours, something incredible happened. Word had somehow spread about what Tobias had done. Construction workers started showing up at the hospital, guys who'd worked with Dad over the years, men who knew him as someone who'd lend tools, share lunch, or cover shifts when someone had family problems. A grizzled old foreman named Charlie sat down beside me around hour 5. "Your dad ever tell you about the time he found me passed out drunk in my truck?" I shook my head. This was maybe 10 years ago. I'd been drinking my paycheck away, sleeping in the cab behind a 7-Eleven. Ray found me, drove me to a clinic, sat with me through detox. Charlie's voice cracked. Never said a word to the other guys. Never made me feel like a charity case. Just treated me like a man worth helping. Before I could respond, another man approached. Miguel, probably in his 50s, holding a thermos of coffee. "Ray helped my family when ICE was threatening deportation," Miguel said quietly. "Paid for our lawyer, wrote character references, even testified in court about my work ethic. We're citizens now because of him." One by one, they shared their stories. Dad had co-signed an apartment lease for Danny when he got out of prison. He'd driven Jerome to job interviews when his car broke down. He'd paid for Luis's kids' medical bills when insurance wouldn't cover a surgery. "Your father," said a young guy named Trevor, "caught me stealing tools from job sites when I was 17. Instead of turning me in, he hired me as his assistant, taught me the trade. I own my own electrical company now." By the time Dr. Hendricks emerged from surgery, there were 27 men in that waiting room, all there because Ray Carmichael had touched their lives in ways I'd never known about. "The surgery went perfectly," Dr. Hendricks announced to the crowd. "Your father's heart is strong. He should make a full recovery." The cheer that went up could probably be heard 3 floors away. When Dad woke up 2 days later, the first thing he said was, "Did we make the house payment?" I laughed through my tears. "Don't worry about money, Dad. Someone took care of everything." "Who?" I told him about Tobias, about the bridge, about the check. Dad's eyes filled with tears. "Tobias Henderson," he whispered. "I remember him. Broken man. Thought I'd failed him when he wouldn't take my card." "You didn't fail him, Dad. You saved him. And he's not the only one." I spent the next hour telling him about all the men who'd shown up during his surgery. With each story, Dad's amazement grew. "I was just doing what felt right," he kept saying. "Exactly. And it came back to save your life." The recovery was slower than we'd hoped. Dad needed weeks of cardiac rehabilitation, physical therapy, and careful monitoring. But every day brought visitors, former co-workers, neighbors, people whose stories I was just beginning to understand. Mrs. Patterson from down the street brought homemade soup every Tuesday. She told me how Dad had shoveled her driveway every snowfall for 12 years without being asked. Never would take payment, she said. Said neighbors help neighbors. An elderly man named Frank visited on Thursdays, always bringing the newspaper and a chess set. Turned out Dad had been driving Frank to dialysis appointments for 3 years after Frank's wife died, and he had no other transportation. Ray never missed an appointment, Frank told me. Even came on Christmas morning when I had an emergency session. Sat with me for 4 hours, just talking about baseball and old movies. But the most surprising visitor was a teenage girl named Zoe. She came with her mother, both of them nervous and emotional. "Your dad doesn't know us," Zoe's mother, Patricia, explained. "But 5 years ago, he saved our lives." She told me how they'd been in a car accident during a thunderstorm. Their car had skidded off the road into a ditch, upside down, filling with water. Dad had been driving home from a late job when he saw the accident. "The fire department said later that your father risked his life crawling into that car," Patricia said. "He got Zoe out first, then came back for me. By the time the EMTs arrived, he was unconscious from smoke inhalation." Zoe, now 16, spoke up. "I've been wanting to thank him for years. My mom said we should wait until I was old enough to understand what he did for us." Dad was amazed by their visit. "I barely remember that night," he admitted. "You were both unconscious. I just did what anyone would do." "No," Patricia said firmly. "Most people would have called 911 and waited. You risked everything for strangers." As Dad grew stronger, we started talking about the future. The medical bills were paid, but he couldn't return to heavy construction work. His cardiologist was clear. No more climbing ladders, lifting heavy materials, or working in extreme temperatures. 40 years of construction work, Dad said sadly. "Don't know how to do anything else." That's when Tobias made another surprising appearance. "I got a proposition for you," he said one afternoon as we sat on Dad's porch. "My business is booming, but I need a partner. Someone who knows quality work, can manage crews, handle the planning side." Dad looked interested but hesitant. "Tobias, I appreciate the offer, but I can't work like I used to." "Who said anything about swinging hammers?" Tobias interrupted. "I need a project manager, someone to coordinate jobs, work with clients, handle the paperwork, all the stuff I hate doing, but you're good at." Over the next month, they worked out the details. Carmichael and Henderson Construction was born, a partnership between two men whose lives had intersected in the most unexpected way. Their first project was renovating a house for a single mother named Diana, who'd been laid off from her nursing job. She needed basic repairs, leaky roof, broken furnace, electrical issues, but couldn't afford a contractor. "We'll work out a payment plan," Dad told her. "You can pay us what you can when you can." Diana broke down crying. "Why would you do this for a stranger?" Dad and Tobias exchanged a look. "Because someone did it for us," Dad said simply. The Diana project set the tone for their business model. They'd take on bigger commercial jobs to fund their community work. For every high-paying client, they'd help a family in need. Word spread quickly through the community. Churches started referring families to them. Social workers gave out their business cards. The local newspaper ran a feature story about their unusual business model. We're not trying to be heroes, Dad explained to the reporter. We're just trying to pay forward what was given to us. Within 6 months, they had a waiting list of both paying clients and families needing help. They hired Danny, the ex-con Dad had helped years earlier, as their first full-time employee. Ray gave me a chance when no one else would, Danny told me. Now I get to help give other people chances. Their second hire was Miguel's son, Antonio, fresh out of trade school and looking for an apprenticeship. Their third was Trevor, the former tool thief who'd become a successful electrician and wanted to be part of their mission. By the end of their first year, Carmichael and Henderson had completed 37 paying projects and 22 pro bono jobs. They'd renovated houses for 3 veteran families, fixed a community center's heating system for free, and built a playground for a daycare center that couldn't afford one. But the project that changed everything was Elena Rodriguez. Elena was 19, 7 months pregnant, and fleeing an abusive relationship. She'd found refuge at a women's shelter, but the shelter was overcrowded and could only house her for 30 days. The shelter director, Maria Santos, called our office desperate for help. Elena's got a job lined up at the medical center, but she needs a place to live before the baby comes. There's a small apartment above the bakery on Elm Street. The owner said she could have it cheap if someone could make it livable. Dad and I went to look at the space. It was a disaster. Water damage, broken windows, holes in the walls, no working heat. The bakery owner, an elderly Italian man named Giuseppe, met us there. I want to help the girl, Giuseppe said in heavily accented English, but I cannot afford big repairs. If you can make it safe for baby, she can live here for almost nothing. Dad walked through the space, making notes. This is a big job, Giuseppe. We're talking new drywall, plumbing work, electrical upgrades, maybe $15,000 in materials alone. Giuseppe's face fell. I have maybe $3,000. That'll cover it, Dad said. I stared at him. Dad, the materials alone will cost $3,000 will cover it, he repeated firmly. I didn't understand until later. Dad and Tobias had decided to cover the rest themselves, along with donating all their labor, but they didn't want Giuseppe to feel like charity. Elena moved in 3 weeks before her daughter was born. The apartment was small but perfect. Fresh paint, new appliances, a nursery area with a crib Dad had built by hand. I don't know how to thank you, Elena told us, tears streaming down her face. You already have, Dad replied. You trusted us to help. That's thanks enough. Elena's daughter, Isabella, was born healthy and strong. Elena worked hard at her job as a medical assistant and eventually saved enough to rent a larger place, but she stayed in touch with our family. 2 years later, she called with incredible news. She'd been accepted to nursing school. I want to help other women like me, she explained. Women who need someone to show up for them when they don't expect it. Elena's story caught the attention of local media, and suddenly everyone wanted to know about Carmichael and Henderson construction. We were featured in newspapers, on radio shows, even on a regional television program about community heroes. We're not heroes, Dad kept insisting. We're just guys who learned that helping people comes back to you in ways you never expect. The publicity brought unexpected opportunities. A major housing nonprofit approached us about partnering on a project to build affordable homes for first-time buyers. A local bank offered to finance community projects at reduced interest rates. The city council invited us to bid on the new community center project, but it also brought unexpected challenges. Some established contractors weren't happy about our pro bono work. They accused us of unfair competition, claiming we were undercutting prices by working for free. If everyone starts giving away their work, complained a contractor named Bill Hartley at a city council meeting, how are the rest of us supposed to make a living? Dad stood up to respond. We're not giving away anything, Bill. We're investing in our community. Every family we help becomes a family that can eventually pay for services. Every kid we give a safe home to becomes a kid who might grow up to build something great. He looked around the room. 15 years ago, someone invested in me when I had nothing to offer in return. That investment created jobs, supported families, and made this community stronger. That's not unfair competition. That's how communities are supposed to work. The room erupted in applause, but I could see we'd made some enemies. The opposition escalated when we bid on the community center project. Hartley and 2 other contractors filed a formal complaint, claiming our nonprofit work constituted illegal dumping and should disqualify us from public contracts. The hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday morning. Dad spent days preparing his defense, gathering testimonials from families we'd helped, documenting how our work had strengthened the community. The night before the hearing, I found him sitting at the kitchen table, surrounded by papers, looking worried for the first time since his recovery. What if they're right? He said. What if we've been doing this wrong? Dad, you've helped dozens of families. You've created jobs. You've made the community better. How could that be wrong? Maybe I'm being naive, he said. Maybe there are rules I don't understand. That's when the doorbell rang. It was Elena, holding 3-year-old Isabella. Miss Maria at the shelter told me about the hearing tomorrow, Elena said. I wanted to give you this. She handed Dad a folder. Inside were letters, dozens of them. Families we'd helped, employees we'd hired, neighbors whose lives had been touched by our work. I organized them, Elena explained. Everyone wanted to speak for you, but Miss Maria said you might need these instead. Dad read the first letter, from Diana, the single mother whose house we'd renovated. It detailed how our help had allowed her to keep her home, return to nursing school, and eventually buy a house of her own. The second was from Trevor, describing how Dad's trust had turned him from a teenage thief into a successful business owner who now employed 12 people. The third was from Patricia and Zoe, the mother and daughter from the car accident, explaining how Dad's heroism had given them 17 years of life together that wouldn't have existed otherwise. Letter after letter, story after story, life after life that had been changed by Dad's simple belief that helping people was the right thing to do. "This is what you've built," Elena said softly. "Not just houses, lives, futures, hope." The hearing the next morning was packed. Hartley and his supporters sat on one side, armed with legal arguments and procedural complaints. Our friends and families we'd helped filled the other side, clutching Elena's letters. The city attorney read the complaint. Technical violations, unfair practices, improper bidding procedures. It all sounded very official and damning. Then Devin Chen, who'd joined the city council since our first meeting, asked to speak. "I've known Ray Carmichael for years," he said. "He helped my family during one of our darkest times, asking nothing in return. That generosity taught my daughter that there are people in this world who help because it's right, not because they get something back." He held up Elena's folder. "These letters represent 43 families whose lives have been transformed by Carmichael and Henderson Construction. That's 43 families who are now taxpayers, homeowners, contributors to our economy." Devin looked directly at Hartley. "You want to talk about unfair competition? These men have created more business for all of us by making our community stronger. Every family they've helped becomes a family that can afford to hire contractors, buy materials, invest in their homes." One by one, people stood to speak. Giuseppe, the bakery owner, talked about how Elena's presence had brought new customers to his business. Frank described how Dad's reliability had inspired him to volunteer as a driver for other elderly residents. Patricia explained how Dad's heroism had motivated her to become an EMT. But the most powerful testimony came from an unexpected source. Antonio, Miguel's son, stood up near the back of the room. He was 24 now, a skilled carpenter and one of our best employees. "5 years ago, my family was living in fear," he said. "My father worked construction, but we were undocumented. Every day we worried about deportation, about being separated." He looked at Dad. "Ray Carmichael didn't just hire my father. He fought for our family, paid for lawyers, testified in court, vouched for my father's character. Because of him, we became citizens." Antonio's voice grew stronger. "Now I employ 3 people in my own side business. I bought a house last year. I pay taxes, vote, contribute to this community. My younger sister is pre-med at State University." He paused, emotion thick in his voice. "How do you measure the value of that? How do you put a price on the ripple effects of one man's kindness?" When the testimonies ended, the room was silent. The city attorney looked at Hartley and his supporters. "Do you still wish to proceed with this complaint?" Hartley shifted uncomfortably. We just wanted to ensure fair business practices." "Mr. Hartley," said Councilmember Janet Walsh, "in your opinion, what would be fair recompense for saving a child's life? For preventing a family's deportation? For turning a teenage criminal into a successful businessman?" Hartley had no answer. The complaint was dismissed unanimously. Carmichael and Henderson was awarded the community center contract. As we left the courthouse, Elena caught up with us in the parking lot. "Thank you for showing me what it means to fight for what's right," she said. "You didn't need us to teach you that," Dad replied. "You already had that strength. We just gave you a chance to use it." 3 months later, Elena graduated from nursing school. She took a job at the hospital where Dad had his surgery, working in the cardiac unit. "I want to help save hearts," she told us, "just like you saved mine." The community center project became our largest and most visible work. But more importantly, it became a symbol of what was possible when people worked together. We hired local subcontractors whenever possible, including some of the men who'd initially opposed us. Hartley's electrical company did the wiring, and he turned out to be a meticulous craftsman who took pride in the quality of his work. "I may not understand your business model," he told Dad one day, "but I respect your results." The center featured a gym, classrooms, a computer lab, and a commercial kitchen for community events. But Dad insisted on one special addition, a memorial garden for community members who'd made significant contributions. The first memorial was for Walter Gibson, Ruby's grandfather, who Dad had saved on the bridge that same night as Tobias. Ruby designed the garden herself, creating a peaceful space with benches arranged so people could sit and reflect. "Grandpa Walter always said gardens were like kindness," Ruby explained at the dedication ceremony. "You plant something small, tend it carefully, and watch it grow into something beautiful that brings joy to everyone who sees it." The community center opened on a Saturday in June. The dedication ceremony drew over 500 people, the largest community gathering in the city's history. But for me, the most meaningful moment came an hour before the official opening. Dad and Tobias were standing in the main entrance, looking at a small plaque they'd installed. "Dedicated to all who stop to help, who plant seeds of kindness without expecting to see them grow, and who believe that tomorrow might be better." "You think we got it right?" Tobias asked. Dad nodded. "I think we honored what we were given." As the crowd gathered for the ceremony, I watched the faces around me. Elena, now a confident nursing student, holding Isabella's hand. Antonio, discussing a construction project with potential clients. Trevor, explaining electrical systems to a group of teenagers interested in trade careers. Giuseppe had set up a stand selling pastries, with all proceeds going to the shelter where Elena had stayed. Miguel was grilling hamburgers alongside Frank, who'd become the center's volunteer coordinator despite being in his 70s. Charlie, the old foreman who'd struggled with drinking, was leading a tour for other contractors. proudly explaining the building's features. Danny was helping set up chairs, his own success story inspiring other ex-offenders who joined our crew. Mrs. Patterson sat in the memorial garden with Ruby, the two women bonding over their shared love of growing things. Patricia and Zoe were volunteering at the registration table. Zoe, now a pre-med student inspired by her mother's career as an EMT. Every person in that crowd was connected to our story in some way. Lives that had intersected, been changed, and gone on to change others. When Mayor Richardson called Dad and Tobias to the podium, the applause was thunderous, but Dad looked uncomfortable with the attention. This center exists because one man decided that two strangers on a bridge were worth saving, he said into the microphone. But it was built by an entire community that decided to invest in each other. He gestured to the crowd. Every person here has a story about helping or being helped. That's what makes a community strong. Not the buildings we construct, but the connections we create. Tobias took the microphone. 15 years ago, I was ready to give up on everything. Ray Carmichael convinced me that tomorrow might be better. Today, I'm standing here with my wife, my children, and a community that's become my family. His voice broke slightly. Tomorrow was better. And because of everyone here, tomorrow will be better for the next person who needs help. And the person after that, and the person after that. As the ceremony continued, I found myself thinking about the ripple effects of that night on the bridge. Dad's simple act of kindness had saved 2 lives, which had led to countless other lives being saved, changed, and improved. But the ripples were still spreading. During the center's first month, we hosted job training programs that helped 37 people find employment. The computer lab provided internet access to families who couldn't afford it, helping kids with homework and adults with job applications. The community kitchen became a gathering place for cultural events. Giuseppe taught Italian cooking classes. Miguel's wife, Rosa, started a program teaching traditional Mexican recipes. Elena organized nutrition workshops for new mothers. 6 months after opening, the center announced its first major success story. A 17-year-old named Marcus, who'd been heading toward dropping out of school, had used the computer lab to research colleges and apply for scholarships. He'd been accepted to 3 universities with full financial aid. I never thought college was possible for someone like me, Marcus said at the center's 6-month celebration. But seeing all the people here who'd overcome bigger challenges than mine, it made me believe I could do it too. Marcus's story inspired other teenagers. Soon we had a study group that met every evening, older students helping younger ones with homework and college applications. But the program that meant the most to Dad was the one Elena started in the cardiac unit at the hospital. She'd noticed that many heart patients, especially older men, struggled with depression during recovery. They felt isolated, scared, and unsure about their futures. I know someone who might be able to help, Elena told the head nurse. She arranged for Dad to visit patients who were facing similar challenges to what he'd experienced. Not as a medical professional, but as someone who'd been through the fear and uncertainty of heart surgery. I can't tell you the recovery will be easy, Dad would say to patients, but I can tell you it's possible to come back stronger than before. He'd share his story, the surgery, the kindness of strangers, the business he'd built afterward. Most importantly, he'd listen to their fears and concerns. The hardest part, he'd tell them, isn't the physical recovery. It's believing you still have something valuable to contribute. The program was so successful that the hospital formalized it, creating a peer support network for cardiac patients. Dad trained other heart surgery survivors to become volunteer counselors. 2 years after the community center opened, we received a call that would change everything again. "Is this Alex Carmichael?" a woman asked. "My name is Dr. Sarah Jennifer Thompson. I'm a researcher at the university studying the economic impact of community-based social programs." She explained that she'd been following our story for months, documenting the ripple effects of our work. "What you've created here isn't just inspiring," she said. "It's revolutionary. The return on investment from your community programs is unlike anything we've seen." Dr. Thompson had calculated that every dollar Carmichael and Henderson invested in pro bono work generated an average of $7.30 in economic activity within 2 years. "Families you've helped become homeowners, taxpayers, small business owners," she explained. "Their children perform better in school, attend college at higher rates, and contribute more to the economy. The ripple effects compound exponentially." She wanted to document our model as a case study for other communities. "Would you be willing to share your story nationally?" she asked. "This could change how communities approach social problems." Dad was hesitant about the attention, but Tobias convinced him. "Think about how many other Rays are out there," Tobias said. "How many people want to help but don't know how? Maybe our story could inspire them." Dr. Thompson's research led to a feature in Harvard Business Review titled "The Carmichael Model: How Community-Based Kindness Creates Economic Growth." The article caught the attention of foundations, nonprofits, and community organizations across the country. We started receiving invitations to speak at conferences, requests for consulting on similar programs, and offers of funding to expand our model. But the most meaningful response came from a small town in Oregon. "We read about what you're doing," said the caller, a city councilman named Robert Chen. "Our community is struggling, high unemployment, young people leaving, businesses closing. Could you help us implement something similar?" Dad and Tobias looked at each other. Neither had ever imagined their story would spread beyond our small city. "We're not experts," Dad said. "We're just guys who learned that helping people works." "That's exactly what we need," Robert replied. "Not experts, examples." 6 months later, we made our first consulting trip to Millbrook, Oregon. Population 3,200, median income below the poverty line, main street lined with empty storefronts. But the town had something valuable, people who cared about each other and wanted things to get better. We spent a week there, meeting with local contractors, business owners, and community leaders. The model adapted beautifully to their situation. Two contractors, both struggling to find work, agreed to partner on community projects. The local bank offered reduced-rate financing for home repairs. 3 churches pledged space and volunteers for a community center. Most importantly, they identified their own Ray Carmichael, a retired teacher named Martha Williams, who'd been quietly helping families for decades, paying utility bills for struggling neighbors, tutoring kids for free, organizing food drives. Martha's been doing what you do for 20 years, the mayor told us. We just never thought of it as an economic development strategy. Within a year, Millbrook had renovated 12 homes, started a job training program, and opened a small community center. Young families began moving back. 2 new businesses opened on Main Street. You gave us permission to believe that caring about each other could save our town, Martha told us during our follow-up visit. The Oregon Project led to others. A neighborhood in Detroit, a rural community in Alabama, a suburb in Ohio where factory closures had devastated the local economy. Each place adapted the model to their unique situation, but the core principle remained the same. Invest in people, and people will invest in the community. Dad enjoyed the consulting work, but always insisted on staying grounded in our local projects. These other places are inspiring, he said, but this is home. These are our neighbors. Our local work continued to evolve. We'd now completed over 400 renovation projects, built 2 community centers, and helped establish 3 new nonprofits. But the project I'm most proud of started with a phone call from an unlikely source. "Is this the construction company that helps people?" asked a small voice. The caller was an 11-year-old named Sophie Chen. Her family had moved to our city 6 months earlier when her father took a job at the medical center. "My grandma lives with us," Sophie explained. "She has dementia and our house isn't safe for her. Mom cries a lot because she can't afford to fix everything." I arranged to meet Sophie and her mother, Dr. Lisa Chen, at their home. Lisa was a pediatric resident, working brutal hours while caring for her daughter and her mother-in-law, who'd recently been diagnosed with Alzheimer's. The house was a 1960s ranch that needed extensive modifications for elderly care: bathroom safety features, ramps, better lighting, security systems to prevent wandering. "I've gotten quotes," Lisa said apologetically. "It's about $30,000. I know that's more than you usually handle." "Actually," I said, "this is exactly what we handle." The Lisa Chen project became our most complex accessibility renovation yet. We installed sensor lights, reinforced grab bars, a walk-in shower, and a secure garden area where Sophie's grandmother could spend time safely outdoors. But the most important feature was Sophie's idea: a memory wall with family photos, familiar objects, and recordings of family members telling stories about their shared history. "Grandma gets confused about where she is," Sophie explained. "But maybe if she sees things that remind her of happy times, she'll feel less scared." The memory wall worked beautifully. Sophie's grandmother, even in her declining state, would spend hours looking at the photos and touching familiar objects. 6 months later, Lisa called with an update. "Sophie's been accepted to a gifted program for kids interested in medical careers," she said. When they asked her why she wants to be a doctor, she said she wants to help families the way you helped ours. "She's got the heart for it," I replied. She also said something else that I thought you should hear. "What's that?" She said she learned that the best medicine isn't always what doctors prescribe. Sometimes it's just caring enough to show up for people when they need help. Sophie's words stuck with me. At 12 years old, she'd understood something that took some adults a lifetime to learn. The Chen Project also led to an unexpected partnership. Dr. Lisa's department chief, Dr. Asa, Rachel Martinez, had heard about our work through hospital connections. "I've been looking for community partners for a pediatric health initiative," she said. "We want to address housing conditions that affect children's health: mold, lead paint, safety hazards." The partnership between the hospital and Carmichael and Henderson created our most ambitious program yet: Healthy Homes for Healthy Kids. We identified 50 families with children suffering from asthma, allergies, or other conditions linked to housing problems. The hospital provided health assessments and medical oversight. We provided the construction expertise to fix the underlying environmental issues. The results exceeded everyone's expectations. Hospital readmissions dropped by 60% among families we'd helped. School attendance improved dramatically. Emergency room visits decreased. But the real measure of success was watching children who'd struggled with chronic health problems suddenly thrive. "Maria hasn't used her inhaler in 3 months, one mother told us, tears in her eyes. "She's playing soccer now, making friends, being a normal kid." Dr. Martinez documented the program's success in a medical journal article that brought national attention to the connection between housing and health. "The Carmichael model," she wrote, "demonstrates that construction workers can be as effective as doctors in treating certain pediatric conditions, sometimes more effective." The article led to inquiries from medical centers across the country. How could they replicate our approach? What training did our crews need? How could they fund similar programs? Dad found himself speaking at medical conferences, an experience that never stopped amazing him. 5 years ago, I was just a guy with a hammer, he'd tell audiences of doctors and researchers. Now I'm apparently a healthcare innovator. Life's funny that way. But the speaking opportunity that meant the most to him came from an unexpected source. The university's School of Social Work invited him to give the keynote address at their graduation ceremony. These students have spent years learning theories about community development, social change, and helping people, the dean explained. You've actually done it. They need to hear from someone who's proven that one person really can make a difference. Dad was nervous about speaking to an academic audience, but his message was simple and powerful. You don't need a degree to change someone's life, he told the new social workers. You just need to care enough to show up when someone needs help. He told them about Tobias, about the bridge, about the check that saved his life and launched their business. Every person you help will go on to help others, he said. Your job isn't just to solve today's problem. It's to plant seeds of kindness that will grow long after you're gone. The speech was recorded and shared widely on social media. It became one of the most watched graduation speeches of the year, viewed by millions of people around the world. The response was overwhelming. Emails poured in from people inspired by Dad's story, construction workers who wanted to start community programs, social workers who wanted to partner with contractors, families who'd been helped by similar programs in their own communities. But the most touching response came from an unexpected source. Dear Mr. Carmichael, the letter began, my name is Emma Wilson. I'm 16 years old and I live in a small town in Montana where there isn't much hope for kids like me. Emma explained that she'd watched Dad's speech online after her guidance counselor recommended it. She was from a family struggling with poverty, addiction, and violence. She'd been thinking about dropping out of school. Your story made me realize that someone always shows up if you're brave enough to keep trying, she wrote. I decided to keep going. Emma had started a community service club at her high school, organizing teenagers to help elderly neighbors with yard work, grocery shopping, and basic home repairs. We can't build houses yet, she wrote, but we can show people that someone cares about them. Maybe that's enough to start changing things here. Emma's letter led to a correspondence that continued for months. We learned about her town's struggles, lack of economic opportunities, brain drain as young people left for cities, social problems that seemed overwhelming. But we also learned about Emma's determination and the gradual impact of her volunteer efforts. Mrs. Patterson next door hasn't smiled in 2 years, Emma wrote in one letter. But yesterday, after we fixed her back steps, she invited us in for lemonade and told us stories about when the town was thriving. 6 months later, Emma's work had inspired other students. The volunteer group had grown from 5 teenagers to over 30. They'd helped 47 elderly residents with various projects. More importantly, they'd caught the attention of local adults who wanted to support their efforts. The hardware store owner is donating supplies, Emma reported. The church is providing transportation. Even some of the parents who were skeptical at first are volunteering now. Emma's story reminded me of something I'd gradually learned from watching Dad's work. Change doesn't always start with adults. Sometimes it starts with young people who haven't yet learned that problems are too big to solve. During Emma's senior year, she applied for colleges with scholarship support. Her essay about community service and social change earned her a full ride to the state university. I want to study social work and community development, she wrote in her acceptance letter to us. I want to help other small towns discover what they can accomplish when people work together. Emma's story became another thread in the growing tapestry of lives connected to Dad's simple act of kindness on a bridge 15 years earlier. By now, the ripple effects had spread far beyond anything we could track. People who'd heard our story were starting their own community programs. Contractors in other cities were partnering with social service agencies. Medical centers were addressing housing issues as health interventions. But the story that amazed me most came from an unexpected phone call. My name is James Tobias Henderson, the caller said. I think you know my father. Tobias's son was 32, a software engineer living in Seattle. He'd grown up knowing the story of how Dad had saved his father's life, but it wasn't until he became a father himself that he truly understood its impact. I have a 4-year-old daughter, James explained. Recently, she asked me why Grandpa Tobias always talks about Mr. Ray with such love in his voice. James had explained the story, how Dad had found Tobias on the bridge, talked him through his crisis, and changed the trajectory of their entire family. My daughter listened to the whole story, James said. Then she asked the most amazing question. Daddy, if Mr. Ray hadn't been there, would I exist? The question had hit James like a thunderbolt. I realized she was right. If your father hadn't stopped that night, I wouldn't exist. My daughter wouldn't exist. All the good things our family has done in the world wouldn't exist. James had decided to honor that debt in his own way. He'd created a tech startup focused on connecting volunteers with community needs, essentially an app version of what we'd been doing manually for years. I called it Bridge, he said, because that's where second chances begin. The Bridge app launched 6 months later, connecting people who needed help with neighbors willing to provide it. Users could post requests for everything from elderly care to home repairs to tutoring. Volunteers could browse opportunities and offer their skills. Within a year, Bridge had facilitated over 10,000 volunteer connections across 37 cities. Your father didn't just save my dad's life, James told us at the app's anniversary celebration. He taught our family that one person's kindness can echo through generations. Oh, the Bridge app represented something I'd been thinking about a lot. How the seeds Dad had planted were now growing in ways he'd never imagined, tended by people he'd never met. But the most powerful reminder of those ripple effects came on the 15th anniversary of Dad's heart surgery. Tobias organized a surprise celebration, inviting everyone whose lives had been touched by our story. The community center was packed with faces I recognized, and many I didn't. Elena was there with Isabella, now 6 and starting 1st grade. Antonio brought his wife and newborn son. Trevor had flown in from Denver, where he was expanding his electrical business. Ruby brought photographs of gardens she'd designed in 3 different states. But it was the strangers who amazed me most. A couple from Oregon who'd implemented our model in their town. A group of construction workers from Detroit who'd started a nonprofit based on our approach. A medical student who'd chosen public health after reading about our partnership with the hospital. Emma was there, now a sophomore studying social work, with updates about her hometown's transformation. Sophie Chen, now 14 and volunteering at the hospital, brought her grandmother, who had good days and bad days but seemed to enjoy the crowd. Most surprisingly, James Henderson brought his daughter, the little girl whose question had inspired the Bridge app, but the person who moved me most was someone I'd never seen before. "My name is David," he said, approaching Dad near the end of the evening. "I don't think we've met, but your story saved my life." David explained that he'd been contemplating suicide 2 years earlier, overwhelmed by debt, divorce, and depression. He'd been researching methods online when he'd stumbled across the video of Dad's graduation speech. "You talked about how someone showed up for you when you didn't expect it," David said. "It made me think maybe someone would show up for me too if I just waited a little longer." David had called a suicide prevention hotline that night. The counselor had connected him with local resources. He'd gotten into therapy, found a support group, started rebuilding his life. "I'm not saying I'm completely healed," David said, "but I'm here. I'm trying. And last month I volunteer matched through the Bridge app to help an elderly man with his yard work." He smiled. "Turns out helping someone else was exactly what I needed to help myself." Dad listened to David's story with tears in his eyes. "You did the hard part," Dad told him. "You chose to stay. You chose to try. I'm just glad the story helped." As the celebration wound down, I found myself thinking about the mathematics of kindness. Dad's decision to stop for 2 strangers on a bridge had now touched hundreds of lives directly and thousands more indirectly. But it wasn't the numbers that mattered. It was the individual stories. Elena finding the courage to leave an abusive relationship. Antonio becoming a citizen and building a business. Emma transforming her hometown. David choosing life over death. Each story was a miracle in its own right. Together they represented something even more profound. Proof that kindness isn't just nice, it's necessary. That communities don't just happen, they're built by people who choose to care for each other. 6 months after the anniversary celebration, Dad and I were working on a new project, renovating a house for a family whose teenage son had survived a suicide attempt. The boy, Michael, was home from the hospital, but struggling with depression and anxiety. "I don't know if this will help," his mother had said when she called us, "but Michael's therapist thinks having a project to focus on might be part of his healing." Michael turned out to be a natural carpenter. Working with his hands, creating something beautiful from broken materials, seemed to calm his anxiety in ways that medication and therapy hadn't been able to achieve alone. "There's something about fixing things," Michael told Dad one afternoon as they worked on refinishing hardwood floors. "It makes me feel like maybe I can be fixed too." "You're not broken," Dad replied gently. "You're just hurt. There's a difference." As Michael's confidence grew, he started helping with other projects. He had a gentle way with elderly clients and a patience that made him perfect for detail work. By the end of the summer, Michael had decided he wanted to learn construction professionally. He enrolled in trade school with plans to join our crew after graduation. "Working with you guys saved my life," Michael told us. "I want to help save other people's lives, too." Michael's story reminded me of something I'd learned watching Dad's approach to helping people. Sometimes the person being helped ends up helping the helpers. The healing goes both ways. As I write this, 17 years have passed since Tobias walked into that hospital cafeteria with a check that saved Dad's life. Our business now employs 63 people. We've completed over 900 projects. We've helped establish community programs in 47 cities. But those numbers don't capture the real story. The real story is Emma, now working as a community organizer, teaching other young people that they have the power to change their circumstances. It's Elena, now a nurse practitioner running a clinic for domestic violence survivors, showing up for women the way we showed up for her. It's Michael, now our youngest foreman, specializing in projects for families facing mental health challenges. It's Antonio, whose construction company has hired over 30 people and whose sister just graduated medical school. It's Sophie Chen, now studying to become a pediatric social worker, inspired by watching her family receive help when they needed it most. It's James Henderson, whose Bridge app has facilitated over 50,000 volunteer connections and inspired similar platforms around the world. It's David, who now volunteers with a suicide prevention organization and has personally talked 17 people through crisis moments. And it's thousands of other stories I'll never know about. Lives touched by people who were touched by our story. Kindness spreading in directions I can't trace. Ripples reaching shores I'll never see. Dad is 78 now, still working every day, still stopping to help strangers, still planting seeds he'll never see bloom. His heart is strong, his spirit stronger. "You know what I think about sometimes," he said recently as we sat on his porch, watching the sunset. "What's that?" "That night on the bridge, if I'd driven past instead of stopping, none of this would exist. Tobias might not have survived. I might not have survived. You might not have learned that helping people is the most important work we can do." He paused, looking thoughtful. "Makes me wonder how many other moments like that we all miss. How many chances to change someone's life we drive right past because we're too busy or too scared or too focused on our own problems. Maybe that's the real lesson," I said. "Not just that someone showed up for you when you didn't expect it, but that we all have the power to be that someone for other people." Dad nodded. Every day, someone's standing on a bridge. Maybe not literally, but metaphorically, facing a crisis, feeling hopeless, ready to give up. And every day, the rest of us have a choice. Keep driving or pull over and see if we can help. As the stars came out that evening, I thought about all the bridges in the world, literal and metaphorical, all the people standing on them, wondering if tomorrow might be better. All the potential helpers driving past, not realizing they have the power to change everything. And I thought about the simple truth that had shaped my family's story. When someone shows up for you in a way you don't expect, they're not just changing your life. They're changing every life you'll ever touch, every person you'll help, every moment of goodness you'll create in the world. The most beautiful part? It never really ends. Every day, someone new discovers our story. Every week, another person decides to stop and help a stranger. Every month, another family gets a second chance. All because 33 years ago, my father saw two broken men on a bridge and decided their lives were worth saving. And 20 years later, one of those men decided Dad's life was worth saving too. That's how love multiplies when you give it away. That's how one moment of unexpected kindness can change the entire world. The ripples are still spreading. They always will be. Because somewhere tonight, someone is standing on a bridge, literal or metaphorical, wondering if tomorrow might be better. And somewhere else, someone is choosing to pull over, to stop, to show up in a way that will echo through generations. That's when someone shows up for you in a way you don't expect. They don't just rescue your present. They transform your future, and the future of everyone whose life you'll touch from that moment forward. And the beautiful, miraculous truth is this: we all have the power to be that someone for someone else. We just have to choose to stop.